The first thing you learn in a college dorm is that privacy is a myth. The second, if you're unlucky, is that sometimes the person you share a room with isn't just a stranger. They're a doorway to something else entirely. My name is Mark, and room 311 was where my reality began to unravel. It started subtly, as these things always do. My new roommate, Sam, arrived a week after me. He was quiet, almost unnervingly so. He moved his few boxes in, arranged his side of the room with an austere precision, and then seemed to melt into the background. He wasn't unfriendly, just absent. He'd nod if I spoke, offer a brief, almost whispered answer, and then retreat behind a textbook or the glow of his laptop screen. I tried to make conversation, offered him a coffee, suggested we grab a bite at the dining hall, but he always politely declined. "I'm good, thanks," he'd say, his eyes never quite meeting mine, always seeming to drift to some point just over my shoulder. I figured he was just shy, maybe a little socially awkward, plenty of those in college. I wasn't bothered. I had my own friends, my own routine. We coexisted, two planets in a small shared orbit. Then the little things began. It was my keys first. I always left them on the small hook by the door, a habit ingrained since childhood. One Tuesday morning, rushing to an early lecture, they weren't there. I panicked, tearing through my backpack, rifling through my desk drawers. They weren't. I was about to give up when I spotted them, perched on the edge of my bookshelf, right next to a stack of textbooks. I distinctly remembered hanging them up the night before. I stared at them, a prickle of unease on my neck. Sam was still asleep, or at least, his side of the room was silent. I shrugged it off. Sleep deprived, maybe I'd just forgotten. A few days later, it was a book. My copy of Frankenstein, which I'd been rereading for a literature class. I'd left it open, face down on my desk. When I came back from dinner, it was closed, standing upright on the shelf above my desk, nestled between two other novels. Again, I felt that odd prickle. I knew I hadn't put it there. I looked at Sam, who was engrossed in a textbook at his own desk. "Hey, Sam," I said, trying to sound casual. "Did you happen to move my book?" He slowly turned, his expression blank. "Your book?" "Yeah, Frankenstein. I left it on my desk, but it's on the shelf now." He blinked. Why would I move your book?" His voice was flat, devoid of curiosity or defensiveness, just a simple, unadorned denial. It made me feel foolish for even asking. "Right, no reason," I mumbled, feeling a flush creep up my neck. "Must have done it myself, forgot." He just nodded, then turned back to his reading. The incidents continued. My phone charger, which I always kept plugged into the wall socket by my bed, would be unplugged and coiled neatly on my nightstand. A specific t-shirt, folded in my drawer, would reappear draped over my desk chair. My headphones, left on my pillow, would be carefully placed back in their case. These weren't grand acts of sabotage, just tiny, almost imperceptible shifts in the mundane order of my possessions. Each time I'd ask Sam, and each time he'd deny it with that same unnerving calm. My questions eventually stopped. What was the point? He clearly wasn't going to admit it, and I couldn't prove anything. It was just happening. The real horror began when the replacement started. The first was my toothbrush. I remember it vividly. It was a cheap, blue plastic toothbrush, nothing special. One morning, I reached for it in its holder by the sink, and my fingers registered a subtle difference. The bristles felt newer, sharper. I pulled it out. It was identical to my old one, same brand, same color, same model number etched into the handle, but it felt somehow too new. My old one had a slightly frayed look to the bristles, a faint discoloration near the base from weeks of use. This one was pristine. I stared at it, a cold dread seeping into my stomach. I knew, with a certainty that bypassed logic, that this was not my toothbrush. My old one was gone, replaced. I tried to confront Sam, but he wasn't in the room. I spent the day feeling off-kilter, like the world had subtly tilted on its axis. When I got back, Sam was there. I held up the toothbrush. "Sam," I said, my voice tight, "did you do something with my toothbrush?" He looked at it, then at me. "Number, that's your toothbrush, isn't it?" "It's not my toothbrush. My old one is gone. This is new." He frowned slightly, a rare display of emotion. "It looks exactly like yours, Mark. Maybe you just bought a new one and forgot?" "No, I didn't. Why would I?" He just shrugged, a gesture that conveyed utter indifference. "I don't know, Mark. People buy new toothbrushes." I felt a surge of frustration, but also something deeper, a sickening fear. How could he be so calm? How could he deny something so obvious to me? I wanted to scream, to shake him, to demand answers. But what answers could he possibly give? He was either a master manipulator or something else entirely. The replacements escalated. My favorite mug, a chipped ceramic one with a faded band logo, vanished. The next day, an identical mug appeared in its place in the drying rack. The logo was crisp, the ceramic unblemished. It was a perfect replica, except for the tiny, almost invisible chip near the rim that my original had. That chip was gone. Then it was my faded gray t-shirt, the one I'd worn to countless concerts, soft with age and riddled with tiny holes. I found an identical one folded neatly in my drawer. The fabric was stiff, the color vibrant, the holes absent. It smelled faintly of something metallic, like ozone after a lightning strike. I started to feel like I was losing my mind. I told my friends, Liam and Chloe, about it. They tried to be supportive, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. "Are you sure you're not just, misplacing things, Mark?" Liam asked, trying to sound helpful. "Or maybe Sam's just a neat freak and Tatey's up and you're overthinking it." "He's replacing them, Liam, not just tidying. He's taking my things and putting perfect copies in their place," I practically shouted, my voice cracking with desperation. Chloe put a hand on my arm. "Mark, look, I know you're stressed. Midterms are coming up. Maybe you're just a little paranoid?" Paranoid. The word hung in the air, heavy and damning. They didn't believe me. How could they? It sounded insane. Even to me sometimes, it sounded insane. But I knew what was happening. My own possessions, the anchors of my identity, were being systematically erased and replaced. It was like a slow, insidious invasion, not of my space, but of my very existence. I started keeping a log, a small, spiral-bound notebook hidden under my mattress. I documented every misplaced item, every replacement. The date, the item, the subtle difference. I even took blurry photos on my phone, though they never seemed to capture the unsettling newness of the replacements. They just looked like my old things. How could I prove a feeling, a subtle shift in texture, a missing chip? I began to feel an intense, suffocating dread whenever I was in room 311. The air felt heavy, thick with something I couldn't name. I started spending as little time there as possible, fleeing to the library, to friends' rooms, anywhere but the place that felt increasingly like a stage for some twisted experiment. Sam remained unchanged, quiet, polite, utterly devoid of any discernible personality. He was a perfect blank slate, which only made his actions more terrifying. It was like he was a machine, performing a function, completely detached from the implications of what he was doing. Was he even human? The thought, once a fleeting, paranoid whisper, now screamed in my head. My sleep became fractured, haunted by vague, unsettling dreams of being trapped in a room of identical, featureless objects. I'd wake in a cold sweat, my heart hammering, convinced I'd heard a faint rustling sound from Sam's side of the room. Then came the night of the driver's license. I had finally drifted into a fitful sleep, exhausted from days of anxiety. The dorm was silent, the kind of deep, oppressive quiet that only happens in the dead of night. I was pulled from my sleep, not by a sound, but by a chilling sensation, the distinct feeling of being watched. My eyes fluttered open, slowly adjusting to the gloom. And then I saw him, Sam, standing over my bed. His form was a dark silhouette against the faint glow of the campus lights filtering through the window. He was absolutely still, his head cocked slightly to the side, and in his hand, held up close to my face, was my driver's license. My breath hitched in my throat. I couldn't move. My muscles were locked, a primal terror seizing me. He wasn't just holding it, he was studying it. His eyes, though obscured by shadow, felt like they were burning into my own, then meticulously scanning the details on the card. The photograph, my name, my date of birth, my address. He was absorbing it all, not with curiosity, not with malice, but with an intense, almost scientific focus. It was as if he were memorizing every detail, every curve of my face in the picture, every letter of my name, as if he were mapping me. A faint, sickly sweet smell, like burnt plastic and something metallic, drifted from his direction. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there, clinging to the air around him. The silence in the room was absolute, so profound it felt like a physical pressure on my eardrums. I could hear the frantic thumping of my own heart, a drumbeat against the terror. He held the license there for what felt like an eternity, his gaze unwavering, his body utterly motionless. Then, as slowly and deliberately as a machine, he lowered his hand. He didn't look away from my face. He simply turned, his movements fluid and silent, and walked back to his side of the room. I heard the faint, almost inaudible click of something being placed on his desk. He never made a sound. He never acknowledged that I was awake, that I had seen him. I lay there, rigid with fear, until the first rays of dawn pierced the window. My body trembled uncontrollably. I didn't know what he was doing, but it was clear that the game had escalated. It wasn't just my possessions anymore. It was me, my identity. I got out of bed, my movements stiff and jerky. I didn't even bother trying to be quiet. I just wanted out. I grabbed my backpack, threw in some clothes, my phone, and my wallet. As I reached for my keys on the hook, my fingers brushed against the familiar plastic of my driver's license. It was there, back in my wallet, where I always kept it, just as I'd found it. Yet I knew it had been in his hand. I fled the dorm. I didn't tell anyone. Not Liam, not Chloe. They wouldn't believe me. They'd just tell me I was paranoid again. I went to a coffee shop, ordered a triple espresso, and tried to think. What was I going to do? I couldn't go back to room 311. I couldn't be in the same space as Sam, not after what I'd seen. I called the housing office from a payphone. I couldn't bear to use my cell phone, convinced he could track it, or that it too might have been replaced. I explained vaguely that I had an urgent family emergency and needed to move out immediately. They were surprisingly accommodating, likely used to students with sudden crises. They said I could pick up my belongings later that afternoon, but the room needed to be cleared for the next student. The thought of going back filled me with a cold dread, but I had to. My laptop, my textbooks, everything was still there. I waited until late afternoon, figuring Sam would be in class. The walk back to the dorm felt like a death march. Every shadow seemed to writhe, every distant sound a whisper of my name. When I reached the third floor, the hallway was deserted. The air felt colder, heavier, around room 311. I fumbled with my key, my hand shaking, and pushed the door open. The room was exactly as I'd left it. My side, a chaotic mess of clothes and books. Sam's side, pristine and orderly. The silence was unnerving. I moved quickly, stuffing my clothes into a duffel bag, grabbing my laptop. I didn't want to touch anything on Sam's side, didn't want to even breathe the same air. As I reached for a stack of textbooks on my desk, my gaze fell on Sam's desk, and that's when I saw it. Nestled among his own sparse belongings on his otherwise meticulously clean desk was a small, crudely carved wooden bird. It was painted a faded blue with one wing slightly chipped. My heart seized. I remembered that bird. My grandmother had carved it for me when I was a child. It had always sat on my nightstand at home. I hadn't brought it to college. It was too precious, too fragile. It was meant to stay safe, a piece of my childhood. Yet there it was, on Sam's desk. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and picked it up. It felt real, felt exactly like the one my grandmother had made. But how? How could it be here? I didn't bring it. It was impossible. A voice, soft and smooth, spoke from behind me. "Looking for something, Mark?" I spun around, dropping the bird. Sam was standing in the doorway, his eyes fixed on me. He wasn't smiling. His face was, as always, unreadable. But there was something in his eyes now, a flicker of something ancient and knowing that sent a shiver of ice through my veins. What is this?" I stammered, pointing at the bird on the floor. "How did you get this?" He took a step into the room, then another. The air around him seemed to grow colder, the metallic smell stronger. "It's yours, isn't it?" he said, his voice still that quiet monotone, but now laced with a subtle, chilling inflection. It was no longer just a question. It was a statement of fact, a declaration. "I didn't bring it here," I yelled, my voice cracking. "It was at my house. How did you get it?" He stopped a few feet from me. His gaze drifted from my face to the fallen wooden bird, then back to me. "You didn't bring it, no," he confirmed, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. "But it belongs here now, with the others." The others. My mind reeled. The toothbrush, the mug, the t-shirt, all the things he'd replaced. But this was different. This was something I hadn't brought to college, something from my childhood, something intimately tied to my past, my home. "What are you doing?" I whispered, backing away, my hand instinctively reaching for the door handle. He tilted his head again, that familiar, unnerving gesture. "I'm making things right, Mark, putting things where they belong." His eyes seemed to bore into mine, and for the first time I saw it. Not a human soul, not a malicious spirit, but something vast, indifferent, and utterly alien. It was like looking into a deep, dark well and seeing not water, but the endless, cold void of space. "You're not Sam," I breathed, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. He didn't deny it. He didn't even acknowledge it. He simply took another step towards me. The metallic smell was overwhelming now, burning my nostrils, making my eyes water. The room felt like it was pressing in, the walls subtly shifting, the floorboards groaning as if in agony. I felt a sudden, sharp coldness on my skin, like frost forming on my exposed arms. You're replacing me, aren't you?" The words tumbled out, a horrifying understanding dawning on me. He wasn't just replacing my objects. He was studying me, memorizing me, taking pieces of my life, my identity, and replicating them. He was preparing for me. He didn't answer. He just kept coming, slowly, relentlessly. His eyes, those fathomless voids, were fixed on me. I saw my reflection in them, distorted and small, and for a terrifying moment, I saw something else, a flicker of another face superimposed over my own, a face that was me, but not me, a perfect copy, devoid of life, a vacant shell. I screamed. It was a raw, guttural sound torn from the deepest part of my being. I didn't wait. I didn't think. I scrambled backwards, fumbling for the door, my fingers clumsy with terror. I yanked it open and burst into the empty hallway, not looking back. I ran. Down the stairs, past the bewildered few students who were just emerging from their rooms, out into the crisp evening air. I didn't stop until I was miles away, my lungs burning, my legs aching. The image of Sam's vacant eyes and that chilling, knowing smile burned into my mind. I never went back to room 311. I never saw Sam again. I dropped out of college, unable to shake the pervasive feeling that I was being watched, that something was still out there, meticulously collecting and replacing the pieces of my life. I moved to a different city, tried to start over, but every now and then I'll reach for my toothbrush and it will feel subtly too new, or my favorite shirt will suddenly feel stiff, the fabric unfamiliar. And sometimes, late at night, when the house is silent, I catch a faint metallic scent, like ozone after a lightning strike. And I wonder, is it really me, standing here? Or am I just a perfect copy, waiting for the original to be found, waiting for the final piece to fall into place?
Thank you so much for sticking with me to the end. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you liked this video, please hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.